Welcome, everyone. This is Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Rearden, and I will be your mindset coach today. And today we're going to be talking about communication, but more for the parent and in the relationship with their children. Now, not only children in general, but also your preteens. I remember there was a family member of a client that I used to work with quite a bit, and she would always make a running joke, and she's older. She probably maybe in her late 50s, around there. Maybe even 60s. She would say, I survived 3 teens at once. And I think they were all boys. And she was just saying how it was a struggle. And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm sure having teens is definitely a struggle, but to what degree? I can look back at my upbringing and how I was and my rebellious nature. And I can say I definitely wasn't the easiest cat probably on the block, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I was difficult and my parents couldn't take care of me or handle me. To some degree, the communication that we have today is also going to set the standards and the expectations for our children later on. It's almost like how children learn which parent to go speak with. Because if I go talk to my dad about something and he says something negative that I don't want to hear, but if I know my mom is going to be someone who's going to give me what I'm looking for, I'm probably going to talk to my mom before I talk to my dad. We can look at the aspect of good cop and bad cop and say, which one should we be, parenting toward? The reality is, it's not so much of taking a side of good or bad, of yelling and screaming or being overly kind and affectionate toward them. It's something that we have to display, something we have to present. Communication is more than just, hey, I'm going to go talk to you. I'm talking to you. I'm not talking at you. I'm telling you to clean your room. You're not cleaning your room. It's more than that. There's a deeper understanding to communication. And today we're going to be looking at all the nuances of communication. We're going to be looking at the things that you might have missed, the things that are going on in the world. And we're going to be presenting ways and systems and small steps that you can take today that is going to help you get into a better communication with your family, your children, your preteens especially. All of this is going to be something big that we can take advantage of today with my guest, Aurelius Higgs. Welcome, Aurelius Higgs, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
Michael, I'm wonderful. Thank you for sharing your platform. Looking forward to this conversation.
Same. We're going to be talking about your work as a communication coach, and you have a very specific niche when it comes to communication, because I understand sometimes communication can be how much time are you talking with someone, maybe spending with them. But in our world today, communication has changed drastically. I mean, don't call me anymore. Just text me. I'm sure you have heard about that. And it is so interesting how times have changed, where we have never been more connected, but now we are so disconnected. And we're going to be talking about your work. Can you tell the world who you are, what you do, and how you help?
Hey, okay, so my name is Marcus Aurelius Higgs. That is my given name. And I'm a communication coach for parents of preteens. So I work with the parents and helping them open up the communication with their parents. As you said, there are particulars of this generation in this time. I love how you said it's oftentimes how we talk. And also, let's not forget also how we listen, how receptive we are to the messages so that we're in alignment. Who I am, how do I help? I support them. Mr. Rogers said, if you want to help the kids, you support the parents. I'm a former high school teacher with a book for my 5th graders, the Goodbye book. I can tell you more about that later, but how do I help? I support them. Life supports those who support life. Remembering my own father, me growing up, remembering the international school students that I work with. And the whole idea is to stay in the game long enough that I could help them with their kids.
There's a concept that when we're a parent and we're raising our children, at some point we are going to separate from them to a degree, meaning that they're going to go off and be with their friends and, follow that peer acceptance part of society. And it's not so much of mom and dad anymore. There's a statistic, I forget the exact numbers, but let's ballpark it. it's like, I want to say 70% of the time you have spent with your child is already accumulated by the age of what, like 12 or 13 or something along those lines. And then by the time you're 18 or they're 18, it's 90%. I find that to be an astounding reality where it's just like by the time you are taking off their diapers, you're about 50% or almost or maybe 30% there. And then before you know it, they're going off eighth grade. That right there is kind of like a wake up call for us to say, where are they going? And I know many parents, they will spend any amount of money to make sure that their children are in the best situation. They'll put them in sports camps, they'll give them, toys and extravagant trips. But then there's also that concept of it's not so much about how much money we spend with them, it's how much time we spent with them. And sometimes parents, they get this idea in their head or in their mind that I'm going to spend money on my children rather than spending time with my children. Do you find that to be one of the issues that many parents are struggling with today?
Mm. There's a book by a woman named Madeline Levine. It's called The Price of Privilege. So I worked at international schools and I was a mentor for affluent families for a time. You could speak of spending time with your kid and spending money. Let's switch that to say investing time or investing money. And that is with the full intention of looking for a return of what's going to happen later on. So being intentional on looking for the multiplier, the ROI. What does that look like? I think, again, it depends on your value system, but I think that is creating kids, creating people, creating members of society who create value, add back to it, and eventually they're going to lead to interdependence. So they're dependent now. They seek their independence, creating who they are. But the whole idea is that I will take care of me to be in support of you if you promise to take care of you to be in support of me, because that's how this community and society is made stronger. So to your question, I do see that with some people. And those who I work with, the whole idea is let's work towards interdependence by investing it, being intentional in how we're spending it.
Very true. And the mindset, though, of our youth today is very different than the mindset of the youth generations ago. We can even go back just 2 generations, where now it's all about me, where I would like to go live my life. I want to go retire early. I want to travel the world. Sometimes, as a child, we forget that as we are growing up, our parents are growing old. And it's difficult for us to one day look at our parents and say, hey, like, why are you not able to keep up like you used to? Or why don't you have that same, light in your eye? It's almost like we forego the relationships that we have been building this whole entire time. And I know it's challenging for parents because it's almost like they're coaching themselves out of a job. By the time their kids are 18, like their job is done, essentially. It's like, yeah, you might be there to give them some marriage advice or, be their friend or something along those lines. But the reality is, many of these children that are just going out, they're going to go live their own life. They're going to get their own job. They have, the American dream type of mindset where I'm going to go have my own house and I'm going to go raise my own family. We're separated. So the family that was once together is now divided. And then later on, it's almost a burden to have the parent come in because they need care. They can't stay by themselves. So what typically tends to happen is they throw them in a nursing home or something along those lines. It's a far cry from what it was because before, one of the main reasons to have children wasn't to procreate and have children. It was to have the children take care of the parents. And we just live in a different world today where that has changed. Do you find that many parents fear that they're going to one day separate from their children? So they want to build their communication skills today so they can have a good, healthy relationship even past 18?
Mm, okay. I'm not sure if many parents look that far into the future for what their fears are, right?
Yeah.
um, I will say this, hearing your question, it comes down to culture too. Culture is collective identity. People like us do things like this. And you're absolutely right. In the developed world, oftentimes when kids become members of society, they may not come back. I'm actually here with my aged parents in the Bahamas. My work affords me the ability to come back and spend time with my parents. But if you do have some forethought, some like as a parent, you are again investing that time to say, yeah, when we do get old, remember us. And maybe it might be a request, and in some cultures, that is what you do. That is just what you do. Back to something else that you mentioned. There's a book called The Anxious Generation, and in 2020, we noticed that uptick in mental health issues. And I'm not a person who's like against social media. However, what happened is kids are having fractured identities. They're forming their identity behind the screen or behind the glass. That's how I say it. But they're not forming their identity at home or in communities. So when the computer closes, the question is, who am I? If you don't know who I am, you can't push against the stressors of life. And that's where that anxiety comes from. And that's what I try to answer with my work. Because when a person knows who I am, you're setting them up for a life of how to deal with life stressors. And that's really what life is. It is about growth, but the way you grow is three stressors: one to maintain, one to be robust when it hits you out of the blue, and the other to expand. To expand, you have to push back against the stress. So yeah, to what you're saying, that is a long thought. And if you can see that far, yeah, let's work on the communication now, because the quality of your communication is directly related to the quality of your life.
How do you help parents build and help their children find their true identity?
Yeah. Um, I have the framework, the show up framework.
Mm-hmm.
And S is it starts with a strong identity. That comes from James Clear. That comes from life. Know thyself and you'll understand the secrets of gods and men. It is all action comes from I am. The way I help parents do it is specifically virtues and values. This is coming from the Stoics, is ancient knowledge, but then also positive psychology. Your virtues are the 24 characteristics that are with all humans, regardless of your culture, your religion. If you're human, you have these 24 characteristic traits. And what these characteristic traits are, like bravery, perseverance, leadership, really what they are, these are the traits that work to the well-being of the community or work to the well-being of the individual. So those are your virtues. Your values are the things that are important to you. Could be finances, could be family, could be whatever you want, your faith, you know. Your value is unique to you. So when I recognize your virtues and your values and I give you evidence of that, I'm instilling in you a character. I was just like, oh yeah, I am like that. Like I know you from your podcasts, watching your videos. It's just like, yeah, you do have leadership. You do have social awareness because you're trying to help people. You know what I mean? So when I interact with you, I virtue spot that and I speak to that. And what that is, that's reaffirming that identity in you from the outside in. Parents do that with their kids, and you do it over a long period of time. The trust is built over time. That's how you do it.
It's a powerful framework there because many parents just kind of haphazardly go into parenthood. And some parents, they're trying to be the best parent that they can be. And by that, I mean they're trying to be the parent that they never had. Millennials, for example, they're 71% more active in their children's lives. Why? The reason is because their parents never said, hey, let's spend quality time together. You know, I love you, son. I love you, daughter. Like those conversations were never there. And communication now is becoming a big thing. And I was made aware of this maybe a couple months ago now, how we structure our upbringing of children. And, you know, former educator, I know you taught high school, and we can even see it, the good and the bad, right? We can call it that. One of the things that happen is when you have your baby's all on you, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're all on you still. Eventually, we start to force them to go to school. And I know there's state laws and things like that, but you can always homeschool and do things like that, right? So this is a whole dynamic now, right? Where now they're learning to separate from the mom and the dad, and then they go off with the peers. And that just kind of every year, it's almost like they get further out of reach from the parents. And do you think that if we didn't have a mandatory system where we separated the kids from the parent for education, for example, let's say there was a system in place that there was a parent that was able to stay home, government assistance, whatever you call it. It was on the Joe Rogan podcast. They figured out how much it would cost to give every American family $200,000. It'll only be $40 billion a year. We spend more on military weapons than that. So it's feasible. This number is doable. Where now the parent is involved in education and the raising of this child versus, all right, go off to school, get your education. And if you have been in school any amount of time, I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole with you, but there's an
You're good.
indoctrination
You're
that
good.
happens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
from that, and from there, it's like we lose those values, we lose that identity. And that is where we go into this spiral, and there's so much confusion. What's your take on that?
Huh. That's a broad question. That's a lot. That's a big question that
It
we've been
is. Go for
discussing
it.
for a long time. Yeah. Education means to bring forth. That's what it means to educate. Interesting. That's also what it means to parent. And if you do your job well enough, those whom you serve will not need your services. It's an interesting thing. Parents, teachers, and doctors. Think about that. Now, we need public education. Yes. I believe technology is also going to create a space where we can have more individualized, smaller, intentional studies. Pandemic pushed us towards it. There's also the movement of micro schools, which I'm a big supporter of. Student voice, student choice, independent studies aligned with your interests so that you're supported in your autonomy for the full expression of yourself. I believe, like, I hear what you're saying. There's an indoctrination of that. A system is set up. No system is broken. That is to say, a system serves a purpose on the out end. And if you want to change what comes out on the other end, you have to change the system. And what the system was set up to was to break the spirit of people so that they can be more controlled. That said, technology is speeding up the flow of consciousness or understanding and the ability to access what's here, to bring forth what is here. There's going to be a change soon coming with the advent of AI and the advent of, again, the speeding up of consciousness, speeding up of thought. So I'm hopeful for the future, and I'm playing my part by helping parents speak to that, to bring that forth. I'll add this one point that you mentioned, though. We weren't meant to parent solo, do it in pods, parent pods. It's called allo parenting. There's a book called Mothers and Others if you're interested, but it takes a community to support a parent. And ideally, you have other trustworthy present parents in the community, teachers, coaches, uncles, aunties, and so on. And that's again what I encourage inside my system. When you come in, I ask you to bring two other people or two other people you'd probably think of so that you can create this net, this pod of parents.
Very true. And it says, so what's it saying? It takes a village to raise, or like a tribe to
Raise a
raise.
child. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we have gotten far away from that, it seems like. We can look at, looking at normalized schools. And the first school is like around 1849, 1851, depending on where you're looking at, Massachusetts. And it just started to become more normalized. 1903, Carnegie Rockefeller, he invested, or he was one of the main investors, $1 million only at the time, but it's a lot of money at the time, for building and creating the Board of Education. And I was reading a book, I forget the name, I'll have to put it in the show notes, where there was a educator, 30 plus years. It might have been the book of Weapons of Mass Instruction. that book, he talks about the progress of how school is every decade. And so he was hired to basically determine what would the schools be like in 2020. He basically came to the conclusion, well, the schools are going to be the exact way from 2010. And if we look at our education system, it is outdated from, back when we started to normalize schools. But then this is America. Because if we go to other regions, we go to the Netherlands, for example, they have a phenomenal schooling program. We can look at Japanese and Asian culture. They have phenomenal schooling programs because they approach it differently. Here, we focus quite heavily on testing. And when we do that testing, that creates a divide. I know it created a divide for me. I know I've seen it create a divide for many parents and their children because this is what happens. The kid brings home an F. Parent asks, why'd you get an F? Oh, well, whatever, right? Whatever the reason is, right? Now that child is learning not to trust that parent. So why in the world are they going to talk to the person that just yelled at them because they got an F and they're crying for help? And now they're a teen. They're going to go ask their friends or they're going to ask the teacher maybe if they have a teacher that can support them. But then even sometimes in high school, you're not going to have a teacher that's going to be 100% there. Some
Yeah,
people
you're right.
shouldn't be in the teaching profession, but that's a different conversation. We do these things that harm our relationships, and then we try to fix them later. How can we bring awareness to parents that what we say, what we do, everything that we present to our children is something that they're going to internalize, and they're going to one day either backlash, or it's going to be a backlash, or it's going to be something that they embrace. What's your prognosis on grading and how it can divide parents and their children, and then also how if something bad happens and they tell their parent and their parent flips out? I'm just using grades as an example. It could be I crashed a car. That right there, it creates that communication gap, because why would I talk to somebody that's going to yell at me or go to belittle me? It doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah. I hear two questions there. One is specifically, what are my feelings and opinions on grades? And then the second is parents, in your communication with your kids, you're becoming a source of threat, as I say, as opposed to us supporting a source of support. So the first question, or the first concept, what gets measured gets managed, and grades are needed for some aspects. And personally, I don't like grades, or they don't serve the right purpose as they're usually traditionally shared. So I used to, when I used to grade, it used to be on portfolios and again, moving towards progress or not. But then again, we have to say, without getting into the details of it, yeah, grades don't serve people. Yeah. In bringing out the greatness that is in there, nurturing their potential. That's what I believe should do as teachers. And that's why we have project-based learning or project-based living inside the show up framework that I have. Wonder and explore the world together. It's us working on projects because that's how the future is. That's a clue to the future. To your second point, in my personal philosophy, the universe has sent us nothing but angels. Yeah, there are, to use words, good teachers and bad teachers. I think in all of it, there's a lesson to be learned because I learned from the bad teachers. I don't want to be like that. And everything that eventually grows must first break. And there are people who are in our lives to break us, in a sense, to say. And that's not me invalidating anybody's pain or anything, but that's how I've processed it going forward. Because what trauma is something, a reflection on the past that blocks you in the moment. A lot of my work is future focused to say, okay, how could we alchemize what happened in the past to propel me to the future? It's a Carl Jung line, I'm not what happened to me, I'm what I choose to be. That said, how do you teach this principle to your kid to be stress progressive? Nassim Taleb says, he says anti-fragile. The more something breaks, the stronger it gets. I use the term stress progressive. As you stress me, I step forward. We have to model it. That's the first thing. The second thing is at their identity breaking stages, go in there into their mind with them to be a trusted psychological wise parent. That just means, here's a metaphor I like to use. If you had a house and every time you invited this person over, they threw over the couch or they knocked the pictures off the wall, you wouldn't invite that person over, right? Whereas if every time you invited this person over, they straightened up a little bit, they maybe left a plate of food or something, you'd be like, okay, yeah, like I look forward to when you come again. Imagine that house is your child's mind. And that's just empathy. You have a mind too, and how a particular person comes in, are they there for your well being or not? So, to your point of how should parents speak to kids or when certain things happen, our response, it, it shapes how they will respond to us later on. And if you are seen as a source of threat, this comes from Dr. Dan Siegel in any of his books, but The Whole Brain Child or The Presence of Being, the power of presence. If you're seen as a threat, they won't come to you. That's it. That's the long and short of it. You are there to see them, to soothe them, to make sure they're secure, make sure they're safe. Those four S's. Because when their brain develops as such, their brain starts to flourish, and they're going to be dysregulated. That's why I work with the parents one-to-one as a coach, so that they are a trustworthy, present parent. Like I work with the parents, not the kids. Because if I can get you regulated, if I can get you with your oxygen mask on first, that has the ripple effect.
Mm. What are ways that parents can begin building better communication today? An example could be for dinner, no phones at the table. But I'm sure there's many other options for parents to implement something small today.
Yeah. Um, the smallest thing I could see is seeing the potential, the possibility. And let me explain. It's called the Pygmalion effect. People move towards our expectations. They had two classes and they told the teacher, hey, one class is a class of high achievers, the other class, they're challenged. At the end of the semester, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. The catch is they were both normal classes. So what actually changed? The teacher's expectations of them. And then you might ask, well, how did that happen? It's because the teacher treated them differently. The ideas we hold towards people dictates how we treat that person. The smallest thing you can do is see the potential virtue spot. Remember how I was talking about virtues? But actually see the good inside your child. Find evidence and examples for that. And that doesn't mean to wear rose tinted glasses. And I mean, it's a practice. It's not easy, but that's the first step. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
And it's not about creating the whole systematic guidebook for parents today. This is an opportunity for parents to implement something, and then when they're ready for the next step, reach out to you. There's something I can be doing. They can even look back at how they have been doing. Have they been a person that was positive and uplifting for their children, or have they been absent and bitter? They don't want that for their future. I can't imagine many parents that would want that for their future. Sometimes we get busy with life. We have work. We have to make sure everything is taken care of, roof over their head, food in their bellies, they're safe, etc. We feel like that is love, where I'm doing this, I'm sacrificing for you, for the betterment of you. But yet sometimes they just want to be spoken to, talk, like read to, listened to. But we get busy. I know one of the things I'm sure you probably do is you help them slow down. Let's pay attention. Let's look at the moment. Because if we don't look at that moment, what typically tends to happen is that it's going to run by us. And then one day we're going to look back and say, that was a mistake on my end. Regrets are not what we do, they're the things that we don't do. And as you said, wonderfully in the beginning, it's not about spending money on your kids, it's investing in your kids. And you don't even have to spend money to invest. Time can be an investment. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be a lot. I know sometimes you can feel like you're not 100%, but they don't care if you're 50%. They just want a piece of you. And not a piece of you in a bad way, but a piece of you in a good way, right? The loving.
Let's say investing attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it doesn't even have to be money or time. Yeah. Attention. Go on.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a powerful thing. And our conversation today is just a start.
Hey.
I encourage everyone, with my guests when I have a conversation with them, it's just a general conversation for them to get an awareness of the personality of the guest, of the coach. And then from there to say, this is a person I can resonate with. And every coach has a different aura. I've interviewed hundreds of coaches at this point, and everyone has a different aura. They might say the same things, but there's a different feeling. Like if I worked with you, Marcus, I'm calling you Marcus because that's
You're good. Yeah, that's all
right.
good. Yeah.
That right there is something like I can feel comfortable that, this guy's coming from a good place. I feel that. Versus is someone who's here making a buck, you can tell. You can tell real quick. Like they're just there, they're putting out their programs and, buy this from me and this is XYZ cost. It's not about that. Like people who really care, truly care. And I find that with a lot of educators who go into coaching, it's almost like night and day. Like you can tell an educator that goes into coaching, it's just 100% I'm there to help, to provide, to serve versus someone who is an entrepreneur and they go into coaching. It's like, I'm here to help, but I'm also here to make a buck. It's almost like the nonprofit versus a profit business. And I'm not saying that we don't make a living, but at the same time, it is a mindset. I did love our conversation, Marcus, where we were able to talk, be truthful about what's going on in the world, how parents can begin to take action. But we are getting close to the end. So I would love to get some final words from you and then for you to tell the audience where they can find you.
Hey, some final words. Yeah, teachers are idealistic people and teaching is a skill. I've done it for a decade and a half. I still teach. I just changed my audience and changed the subject matter. I still bring out the greatness in people. Who it is, though, is it's parents of preteens and it's their communication. It's the same skills, just a different audience. And the reason I'm doing it, and I'll end with this. I have many reasons. My own father, my own students. But I remember my friend, he was sitting with his daughter on his lap and he said, Marcus, I love your videos. I love what you're doing out there, but why are you doing this? And I said, they say a nation is made great by men who plant trees for the forest they'll never see. I said, if you and your daughter can have a better relationship by the work I put out there, and I never experience it, I'm happy for you, man. I'm happy for you. You can reach me at marcushiggs.com. I am starting this journey and I will be having more workshops there. Other than that, meet me on LinkedIn. At the end of July, I'll be launching a program. So I'll be building up to it on LinkedIn. Reach out to me there and yeah, we can continue the conversation.
Perfect. And that is my hope for individuals, audience members to start the conversation because that is what we have lost. We have lost the ability to talk to people. We don't know how to communicate, let alone with our preteens. We don't know how to communicate with each other. Where if you take a step forward, you step back to community, you step back to unity, asking for help. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. One of the most powerful things that happened in my life is I learned to ask for help. If something is going wrong, if I needed some assistance, I say, I need some help. And I find the person that can help you. And then this is why, we have coaching in session to bring on wonderful coaches like yourself, Marcus, who can help bring back traditional values, bring back strong family bonds, things that have been put to the wayside for too long. And it's important that we get back to it. So the work that you're doing is not going to be missed. It's not going to be forgotten. You might not see that, result. You might not see the tree grow and then provide the shade for 5 generations later, but you know what you're doing. The ripple effect is there. So I do want to thank you so much for coming on, spending some time and talking about your work. All right, everyone. I'd like to thank you so much for watching that episode with my guest. His name is Marcus Aurelius Higgs. I know he goes both with the M, and Marcus is a great name. It's the name of my father. It's the name of my brother. One of the things, like when I had my son, I know my dad, he's like, I have to name my son Marcus because he's my first son. And then I was even in the mentality of like, am I going to name my first son Michael? And I'm like, there's too many Michaels in the world. And not that Michael's not a good name or anything. But at the same time, I asked myself, it's not so much of, sharing my name, and that's going to be like me passing on something like the baton, or this is my generation, to my children. And sometimes we do that as parents, sometimes unknowingly. We do the things that benefit us and not them, because it makes us feel good that we're doing it, because we might have missed it when we were younger. And then at some point, we find ourselves divided because we were doing everything that was in accordance to us, but not to them, because they're growing up in a different time, in a different world. And I can't tell you how many parents struggle with this because they're not paying attention. We look at the statistics now. Like, let's look at the statistics, because I believe that's very important. When I left teaching in 2016, I saw the rise in mental illnesses in children, in the schools. It was not something that I saw getting better. All right. When I started teaching 2009, and then from 2016, I can see all of the problems. And it's like, that's a problem getting bigger. That's a problem getting bigger. That's a problem getting bigger. And this is not to say that teachers are the problem or the school's the problem. It's just the reality of how the world is trending. All right. Think of it as if you are salting your garden, right? You might be able to get a harvest the first year, but eventually you're going to bleach that soil, and it's going to be very difficult to grow things. In a sense, we are bleaching the youth, the upbringing of the next generations. Things are changing. Things are switching left and right. For example, I know this is not part of the conversation, but this is an interesting statistic that Gen Z is the largest generation, or the generation to have the highest percentage of people going back toward a religion or some type of belief. We talked about the identity, right? They lost it. They don't know who they are. So they're looking to a higher power to figure that out. Gen Z. That's Gen Z. We look at the statistic for mental illness in adults was a staggering 24%, or around there. It's like 22%. And now we can fast forward to today, it's probably 25%. And it's just going to keep on exasperating. How do we stop it? Well, one of the things that we can do as a parent is we can stop allowing the children that we're raising, the generations that are coming up, to fall into this trap of society, right? The social media aspect, right? The TikTok brain, all of this is happening because we're allowing them to have too much time with technology. And I'm not saying if you take away their phone, everything's going to be fixed. It's not that. We have to be attentive. One of the things, and I know we didn't really harp on this quite a bit, but I'm going to harp on it now, is the aspect of raising your children with other parents. One of the things that I love to do is to find a friend, find family member, for example, that has a child in the same age bracket or around the same age. So if they're 5, you can probably hang out with someone who's 3. It still works. Maybe even 2. Because little kids learn a lot from big kids, and big kids learn how to take care of little kids, et cetera, et cetera. All of it works together. It's not only like, oh, you're a big kid, you can't hang out with little kids, or my kids are real old, they don't want to hang out with little kids. We learn something from working together, working with people, helping people grow, nurturing each other. That aspect of having a community of people, 2, 3 individuals, as Marcus was saying, where you can come in trying to work on communication, creating systems together, working together, and bringing back those values. We have strayed a bit from our values and our beliefs. It's no wonder why the identity is under attack. Many people just don't know who they are, who they want to become. One of the reasons why I have so many young adults coming into my office is because they think that they're on the right track, but then they find themselves later on down the road, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, and they're like, I thought I was doing the right thing. I did everything I was told. Well, who told you it? Was it something that your friends told you? Was it something that society told you? Was it something that you read in a book? Or was it something that you decided for yourself? Sometimes we get into the bad habit of just listening and listening and listening and listening, and then finally taking action. But we didn't have any plan. We didn't have any guidance once we started to take part in our plan. That is why mentors and coaches are so valuable today. You need to have a good coach. You need to have a good mentor. You need to have a good teacher, someone who cares besides your parents. Parents, yes, you have to care. You have to love. You have to be there. But you have to also create those pockets where it's not only about mom and dad anymore. It's not only about grandma and grandpa anymore, or auntie and uncle. It's about everyone. We developed that camaraderie that was lost. We're so individualized. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to focus on my life. And I'm not saying that at some point in your life you shouldn't. But at some point in your life, you're going to remember what's important. And right now, we can take a step towards something very important. That's understanding ourselves, understanding our children, understanding that communication is going to be the gateway that's going to fill in all the gaps and all the holes that we are currently riding upon. There's no reason why we have to stay in this mentality. And I encourage everyone to take action today. Communication coach is not only going to help you speak better and help you talk to people, it's going to help you create the lifestyle that you might be dreaming of. We have an end goal most of the time. Sometimes it could be a bit cloudy. But one of the things I think many parents think about, even if they don't think about the whole, 18, 25, 30 years from when their child is born, is the aspect of family. Thanksgiving comes around, we pay attention. Christmas comes around, we pay attention. But what about every other day? Are we paying attention? Communication is going to be that aspect to pay attention more readily. And when you pay attention to the things that are happening in your life, you start to do the things that you're supposed to be doing more readily. It's a mindset thing, but at the same time, it's something that we have to work toward. So again, all the links are going to be in the description box below. I encourage everyone to investigate, to learn more to how everyone can improve their communication skills and or their mindset. We are there to support you. We are here to help you along that journey. It is not something you have to do alone. So don't be in this fight thinking that you're the last man standing. You have a whole army behind you of people who care and want to support you. And the only thing you have to do is allow them to be on your side. My name is Michael Rearden. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, email me coachinginsession@gmail.com. And I'll see everyone on the next episode of Coaching in Session. Until then, everyone take care.